I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son, Daniel, looked me in the eyes and said, "Mom, you'll be fine in the garage for a few days." I thought he was joking. I laughed, waiting for him to join me, but he didn't. He just turned around and shut the door. I heard the lock click from the other side. My heart sank. The cold air rushed in through the cracks in the wall, and the dim yellow light above flickered weakly. It smelled of dust, oil, and forgotten memories. I called out his name again, louder this time. But all I heard was silence. My son had locked me in the garage. That first night, I sat on an old chair with a blanket that smelled like paint. My hands trembled as I thought about how I ended up here. I raised that boy alone. I gave up everything, my comfort, my job, my peace, just so he could live a better life. And now he treated me like a stranger. Tears rolled down my face, mixing with the smell of rust and gasoline. I didn't know if I should cry harder, or save my strength for whatever came next. The second night was worse. I heard laughter from inside the house. Daniel and his girlfriend were watching TV, maybe having dinner. I could smell fried chicken, my favorite. I hadn't eaten since the morning before he locked me in. My stomach growled so loud it echoed in the garage. I tapped on the door softly at first, hoping he'd come. But nobody did. By midnight, I stopped hoping. I remembered when Daniel was a little boy, how he used to run into my arms after school shouting, "Mom, guess what I did today?" He'd show me his drawings and I'd put them on the fridge. That same fridge now stood inside the house, behind the wall separating us. How did the little boy who once cried when I got sick grow into the man who could lock me out like this? On the third and fourth nights, I began to talk to myself just to stay sane. I'd whisper, "You'll be fine, Maggie. You've been through worse." I thought about my late husband, Robert, and how he always said, kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. Maybe I'd been too kind for too long. By the sixth night, my body was weak. My legs ached, and I hadn't bathed in days. But my heart was harder now. I stopped crying. I stopped begging. I started thinking. I looked around the garage, the tools, the boxes, the old papers. I found my old property documents in a tin box on the shelf. My name was still on the house deed. My house, not his. As the first light of the seventh morning crept through the tiny window, I made a decision. I waited until I heard his footsteps near the door. He opened it, surprised to see me sitting there calmly, papers in hand. He smirked and said, "Finally ready to behave, Mom?" I stood up slowly, my knees shaking but my voice steady. "No, Daniel," I said. "I'm ready to remind you who owns this house." I handed him a folded piece of paper. His eyes widened as he opened it. It was an eviction notice. His mouth dropped open, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He stammered, "Mom, you wouldn't." "Oh, I already did," I whispered, looking him straight in the eyes. And that was the moment he realized the woman he thought was weak had finally fought back. The next thing that happened changed everything. Daniel stood there, frozen, the eviction notice trembling in his hand. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I could see the confusion, anger, and guilt mixing in his eyes. For a brief second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered those long, cold nights in the garage, how I had begged for warmth and food, how my own son ignored me like I didn't exist. He dropped the paper on the floor and stormed out of the garage. I could hear him pacing around the house, slamming drawers and muttering to himself. I stayed quiet. My silence was my strength now. A few minutes later, he came back holding his phone. "You can't do this, Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "You're overreacting." I took a deep breath. "No, Daniel. You went too far. You treated me like trash in my own home. It's time you learned that every action has a consequence." He scoffed, but I saw fear flicker behind his pride. "You're really going to throw your own son out?" "You already threw your mother out," I replied softly. That shut him up. After he stormed out again, I went back into the kitchen. The smell of leftover food made me weak. I opened the fridge, the same one that once held Daniel's childhood drawings, and took a bottle of water. My hands shook as I drank. The house felt unfamiliar, like it had absorbed all his cruelty. But as I stood there, a strange calm settled in me. I wasn't scared anymore. The next day, Daniel avoided me. He stayed locked in his room, and I could hear him talking on the phone. Maybe to his girlfriend, maybe to his friends. I didn't care. I had called my lawyer earlier that morning, and he confirmed that the house was legally mine. If he refuses to leave, the lawyer said, we'll involve the authorities. Hearing that gave me strength. That night, as I tried to rest, I thought about the good times, birthdays, movie nights, his graduation. I had raised him alone after his father died. We had each other. Or so I thought. Somewhere along the way, Daniel had changed. The sweet boy who used to hold my hand at the grocery store turned into a man who thought he was above me. I asked myself over and over, where did I go wrong? On the third day after giving him the notice, Daniel came into the living room with his bags packed. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then he smirked and said, "You think you've won, old woman? You'll regret this." I didn't reply. I simply looked at him and said, "May God guide you." He walked out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there in silence, feeling both broken and free. But peace didn't last long. That evening, I noticed something strange. The garage light flickered again, only this time, I hadn't turned it on. I peeked outside and saw Daniel's shadow moving near the window. My heart raced. He wasn't supposed to be here. Then I heard the sound of glass breaking. I froze. Something terrible was about to happen. The sound of the shattering glass echoed through the night. My whole body stiffened. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just the wind or a cat knocking something over. But then I heard heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate, angry. My heart began to pound so loudly that I could almost hear it over the creaking floor. I moved quietly toward the window and peeked through the curtain. My blood ran cold. Daniel was there, standing in the yard, his face half lit by the garage light. He looked different, wild, desperate. His eyes were red and puffy, and in his hand he held a hammer. "Daniel!" I shouted from inside. "What are you doing?" He looked up at me, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you can just throw me out like a stranger? After everything I did for you." My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stand tall. "You locked me in the garage, Daniel. You left me hungry and cold. You did this to yourself." He hit the broken window frame with the hammer, making me jump. "You never understand. You always make me feel small. This was supposed to be my house one day." His words cut deep, but I couldn't let him see my fear. "You can earn respect, Daniel, not demand it," I said softly, trying to calm him down. For a second he froze. His arm dropped slightly. I thought maybe he was calming down, until he kicked the door hard. The old wood shook, and I knew it wouldn't last another blow. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but it slipped from my grip and fell under the couch. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the landline, and dialed the police with shaking fingers. Before I could finish, I heard the front door burst open. "Mom," he yelled. "You're going to listen to me now." I backed away until my back hit the counter. "Please, Daniel, stop this. You're not the boy I raised." He came closer, eyes filled with tears and anger. "You raised me to be nothing. You never believed in me. You only cared about your rules." His voice broke as he said it, and for a moment, I saw the scared boy inside him again. I wanted to reach out and hold him, but I knew I couldn't. Not when he was this angry, not when he had a hammer in his hand. Suddenly, flashing blue and red lights filled the window. The police had arrived faster than I expected. Daniel turned toward the window in shock. "You called them," he whispered. "Yes," I said quietly, "because I still care about you. And I don't want this to go any further." He dropped the hammer and sank to his knees. The officers entered the house, handcuffed him gently, and led him outside. He didn't fight back. He just kept saying, "I didn't mean it, Mom. I just wanted you to listen." When the house grew quiet again, I sat down on the couch, tears streaming down my face. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. No mother ever dreams of seeing her child taken away like that. But deep inside, I knew something had snapped between us. Something that might never fully heal. And as the police car drove off into the night, I whispered to myself, maybe this is what it takes to make him learn. I thought it was finally over. But what happened the next morning proved it wasn't. The next morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. It wasn't loud or violent, just steady and firm. My heart raced, thinking Daniel had somehow returned from the police station. I slowly opened the door, but it wasn't him. It was a young woman holding a small bag and a folded piece of paper. "Good morning, ma'am," she said politely. "I'm Clara, Daniel's girlfriend." My stomach turned. I wanted to shut the door, but something in her eyes made me pause. She looked nervous, almost guilty. "I came to apologize for what happened," she continued. "Daniel is not himself lately. He's been drinking, losing jobs, arguing with everyone. He talks about you all the time, but not in a good way." I sighed deeply. He wasn't always like that. Life changed him, I guess. Clara nodded, then handed me the paper. "He asked me to give you this." I hesitated before taking it. Inside, there was a short note written in Daniel's shaky handwriting. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just felt lost. I'll leave town for a while. Please don't hate me." Tears filled my eyes, but I wiped them quickly. "Thank you, Clara," I said quietly. "You did the right thing." She smiled faintly and left, leaving me alone with the letter. For the next few days, I tried to get back to normal, cleaning the house, cooking, and watering the little flowers in the yard. But the silence felt heavy. Every corner of the house reminded me of Daniel. The empty chair by the table, his old shoes near the door, the echo of his laughter from years ago. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. The street was quiet until I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up and froze. Daniel was standing there, looking thinner, tired, and ashamed. "Mom," he said softly, his voice cracking. "Can I talk to you?" My heart ached, but I stayed still. "You shouldn't be here, Daniel. You broke the law." "I know," he said. "But I needed to see you. I wanted to say sorry face to face." He stepped closer, his eyes watery. "I've been staying with a friend. I lost my job. I don't even know who I am anymore." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug him. Another part still remembered the fear. "Daniel, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I said quietly. "But I do forgive you. You're still my son." He smiled faintly, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Thank you, Mom." I thought maybe, just maybe, things could heal. But before I could speak again, a car pulled up in front of the house. Two men stepped out, one in a dark jacket, the other with a cold, hard stare. "Daniel Parker?" the taller one called out. Daniel turned pale. "Mom, please go inside." "Who are they?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're here for me," he whispered. "I owe them money. Please don't get involved." But it was too late. The men were already walking toward us, and one of them said, "You ran out of chances, Daniel." Before I could understand what was happening, one of the men grabbed Daniel by the shirt. I screamed. The teacup fell from my hand and shattered on the ground. "Let him go," I shouted, rushing forward. One of the men pushed me back roughly. I stumbled but didn't fall. "Please don't hurt him," I begged. Daniel tried to pull free. "I'll get your money. I swear. Just give me time." The taller man sneered. "You've had time. Now you pay another way." He raised his hand, and before I could react, a punch landed on Daniel's face. He fell to the ground, blood dripping from his lip. I screamed and ran to him, but they grabbed me too. "Old woman, stay out of this," one of them warned. Desperation gave me courage. I shouted. "The police are already on their way." It was a lie, but it worked. The men hesitated, exchanged glances, and cursed under their breath. "You better have that money soon," one of them muttered, pointing at Daniel before getting back into their car. When they drove away, I dropped to my knees beside my son. His eyes were half open, his breath shallow. "Daniel, talk to me," I cried. He groaned weakly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I've made such a mess of everything." I held his hand tightly. "Sure, you'll be fine. We'll get help." I called the ambulance, and within minutes, the flashing red lights filled the street again. The paramedics lifted him gently into the van. I went with them, praying silently the entire ride. At the hospital, the doctor said he had a mild concussion and a fractured rib, but he would survive. When I saw him resting, pale and quiet, I finally let the tears flow freely. Later that night, I sat by his bedside and whispered, "You know, Daniel, love isn't weakness. It's strength. But when people misuse that love, they lose the ones who truly care." He turned his head slowly and said, "I know, Mom. I just wish I realized that sooner." We stayed like that in silence for a long time. For the first time in years, I felt we were really talking, not as enemies but as mother and son. Weeks later, when he was discharged, Daniel decided to start over. He sold some of his things, took counseling, and promised to pay off his debts. I could see the change in his eyes. This time it was real. One evening, as we stood in front of the garage, I smiled faintly and said, "You remember this place?" He laughed softly, embarrassed. "I'll never forget it." I nodded. "Good. Because forgiveness is powerful, but memories are lessons. Don't ever let your pride turn into cruelty again." He hugged me tightly, whispering, "I won't, Mom. Never again." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something important. Sometimes love must hurt to heal. Sometimes, people have to lose everything before they truly understand the value of what they had. That night, I locked the garage door for the last time. Not to keep anyone in, but to keep the past from coming back. And that was the day I finally found peace. Not as a victim, but as a mother who chose strength over pain. If you were this mother, would you forgive or fight back? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that touch the heart.